If you were to ask me when and this character was like this ever, I would say at least since 1996. And the one constant between each version, including ones we're going to be talking about today, is that today is the canonical birthday of a one Lara Croft. So, with that in mind, and with new games adaptations on the way, hey, let's celebrate one of multiple franchises hitting 3 full decades this year, the 30th anniversary of Tomb Raider. As per usual, I'm going to be mainly focusing on the big milestones of the franchise, as well as my personal experiences with it over the years. So, let's begin. The first major adventure, her simply titled Lara Croft Tomb Raider, her saw its debut in the year 1996, which, along with Super Mario 64 and Resident Evil the same year, definitely helped push the industry forward into the third dimension. And one thing I always found interesting that despite Lara being very prominent on PC, and and also being something like an unofficial mascot for the original PlayStation in its early years, there's it turns out the first release actually was on the Sega Saturn, of all places, and actually was quite solid. And even though a lot of the things that are done are part of its time, to a point where they had a disclaimer on the version I have now on the remaster collection, and it definitely laid the foundation for every subsequent iteration to follow, and a whole slew of other or or kind of adventure platformers with its each level design of exotic locales around the world being made of all sorts of voxels. Also, before I get too far into this, I once again share the anecdote that her iconic figure was create one of the many things video games create purely by accident, all from like having the value screwed up when and they put in the polygon counts, and even with the discourse and here's at the time of the year since, she definitely established they had some strong sense of agency. She being the one to move the plot forward, or define all these artifacts, move all these crates around, and solve all these elaborate puzzles. The first game was naturally a big hit, selling lean lean to the in its original release alone, hone hone its first year about 2.5 million copies and hitting 7 million, and by the time its sequel saw release is the following year. Let's get into that right now. The following year, a sequel followed in the vein of Tomb Raider 2, and as I continue with her next artwork being says like a dagger Jean and having to elude Italian gangsters and treasure hunters, hers it's still managed to expand the lore even further, and ended up selling 6.8 million copies. He's with the and it turns out, on top of the most obvious example being Indiana Jones being effectively India's district counterparts, with a distaste for despots and a PhD on her wall. I also really enjoy how the Croft Manor one such a practice for the real thing, and yes, I'm not going to lie, me and my late brother were among many people who locked Winston, basically her Alfred Pennyworth, in the freezer a few times. Don't worry, based on the way the place is laid out, they clearly found a way out. And of course, it's apparently clear that with this much success, it wasn't going to be like a one and done title. There was obviously franchise in the making here, with each subsequent year here seeing a subsequent sequel from 1998 to 2000. Let's go over them real quick. 1998, Tomb Raider 3. He was definitely it may not be my favorite installment, but I always have a lot of entertainment value for it. The puzzles, and exploration, of course, like any good game you would expect, build upon it. And it was another her her big hit, as you'd expect, with its release on both PlayStation and PCs, as well as Macs at the time. I'm selling a combined 6 million units in its original release alone. I also especially enjoyed playing it yet again and when I got the remaster collection. You've seen any of my streams a few years back. I'm still trying to figure out how to get them working with my PS5, though I've at least have the account synced with my YouTube, and naturally, as long as people kept buying into them, they would, as you would expect, keep making them as they go. 1999, Tomb Raider Last Revelation, which, as you would suggest as a subtitle, was originally intended to be the finale to the entire franchise, as the original developers wanted to move on to other projects. As I'm about to explain, that didn't exactly go as planned, and while this one at the time and the Ascendants got a bit more mixed reception than the original trilogy did, but I admittedly have a soft spot for it. And with that in mind, I personally have gone back and played it a fair few amount of times, and I'm currently in the midst of doing so yet again, and I may likely start my latest playthrough on PS5 fairly soon. There's also some really good sections about showing how Lara became an adventurer, showing the teenage sections with her and her studies abroad with Professor Werner von Croy, who is a figure who is going to be important in about a couple games, and as well as the Times exclusive expansion, and which was previously only available on the PC version of the game. And while not as big as his original trilogy, it's still respectable 5 million copies is across all units when it's just all released in 1999. And it's one of several pieces of pop culture alongside the other games I'm about to mention that help signal end of the 90s and the beginning of the millennium. 2000, Tomb Raider Chronicles, and by the original developers' own admission, they were more or less making this one because no one else would. And that's kind of understandable whole idea that they were less doing it because they had interesting ideas to who do it and to move the series forward, and instead because the publisher had them under contract, and which happens sometimes means like, which, even though I'll admit it's not the worst game I've ever played by any means, and it also saw a bit more mixed reception across the board, heard on the original PlayStation port, but also that supports the Dreamcast and PCs. And while there was a slight decline between Last of Us and the original trilogy, this one had a more sharp decline, selling 1.5 million copies worldwide in its initial release, which leads into one of the installments I had the most complicated relationship with 2003's Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness. I mean, it was originally going to be pending until November 2001, but the game's production was, in a word, troubled, and in the initial release, it shows. It's a long and complicated story. I believe Matt McMullis has a really good summary of it for his What Happened series, but let's give you the short version. And they definitely wanted to take the franchise beyond just tombs, and thankfully they're still in the game, but also everything from um, cities such as as Paris and Volgograd had, and also had darker storylines, expanding more about the character, and just like stealth RPG mechanics, and even some elements of open world design. But unlike ours, the last one, that obviously got scaled back to more individual levels in the vein of the earlier installments, and trying to reconcile the aging mechanics with the ever-changing nature, especially with the mission of stealth and open world design after both Metal Gear Solid 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3 did just that respectively. And here's the real kicker. If the game did not meet critical and financial expectations, IDOS had it in their contract that if that happened, they would take the franchise away from core design and give it to another developer, which of course happened. While the 2.5 million copy initial sale was not bad by any means, it was plagued by technical and camera problems, and that's exactly what happened. And admittedly, a a remaster version did fix a lot of the issues, including if story and content was cut from initial release, and that's into the storyline, where it's a bit more easy to understand now, where the obscure paintings are cursed and Lara has recovered them, also clear a name of crimes she didn't commit. I emphasize it's been made better, not completely redeemed, I would say. I mean, it's definitely still not without its issues. In regards to like the traversal and trying to elude certain enemies, it's a trial and error process, and I do emphasize the error especially. Where at one moment they're on at you with the full might of their mercenaries. They don't really explain why they're attacking you apart from the incidents. Like, I always had Canada, they were on the villain's payroll, man. Oh, but the next they're like someone just haplessly guarding a shopping center. Or, and I definitely was able to. And before the remaster clearly placed her sidearms in the Louvre section and security room, you could only access them via cheats. And even people usually pretty thorough like rereaders got confused about that one. So, and as luck would have it, the next thing would be a total reboot of Crystal Dynamics. And while many purists at the time cried foul over like a British icon like Lara being given to American developers, Crystal Dynamics did have some pretty solid credits to their name up to that point, such as the cult collect-on platformer Hummer series Gex, the stealth action franchise Thief, and my personal favorite, the Legacy of Kain games. In fact, their work on Defiance gave me confidence in their reboot, which saw release in the year 2006. 2006 would see the franchise undergo its first major reboot with Tomb Raider Legend, and a new dual analog control scheme was implemented to who actually quite pretty effect. I mean, you can still have a lot of the classic puzzle solving and traversal, finding secrets, but I like how it implemented that idea in terms of the auto targeting And the he where the left stick moves your character and the right stick aims your weapons in certain sections. And as someone who actually did start actively playing the franchise on this time frame, it still ranks one of my favorite installments of the franchise. And also was the first to not only really show how things have changed with, but also still keeping core elements such as losing both her parents by the time she gets her degree and really starts adventuring, but also still showing you could tell a serious story while still retaining what's fun about the friends to begin with. The main, and naturally, the game also saw vastly improved color reception over Angel of Darkness. Yes, it also sold, in such release alone, 4.5 million copies, and I naturally wasted no time playing it again once it got dropped on PS Plus, personally. And because of this game's success, it was also the first time they saw fit to reimagine and Lara's first major adventure the following year. 2007, so at least a 2 year anniversary, the first attempt at remaking in the original game. I'll get into others in a little while. Hell, and with that in mind, I think they did a good job not only adapting the original game to a more modern playstyle, but also expanding a bit of the story, which explains why sometimes when and it's not enough just to move around crazy or throw switches. It comes down to a pair of desert eagles being, and even with discourse around it, I think if whether it's a wild treasure hunter or a giant Tyrannosaurus in Peru, this self defense argument does hold water. At least is where I'm sitting in here, and it was either her or them. I mean, don't want to have to think too hard about stuff. And while not as big a hit as Legend was, for my money, 1.3 million copies is still a respectable amount, and it was a big enough hit that one more installment to close out this particular trilogy would release the following year. 2008 saw the release of Tomb Raider Underworld, which has definitely had its moments, and it's not my favorite installment of the initial reboot trilogy, to be honest. But it definitely has its moments, and while it's been a bit way long as I play this one, um, I do remember liking it fine at the time, and I would definitely be open to doing so again, and if I want to really this happens, personally. And while not necessarily like a glowing amount of praise, Hayes, 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 on the whole, it was positively received, and it still sold the whole 3.8 million copies worldwide to this day, and it ended up being the last game that Eidos published before the rights would be bought out by Square Enix as one of their attempts to appeal to the West, and we'll touch on that in just a moment. Now, in 2013, that year would see the release of the second reboot, simply titled Tomb Raider, which really tried to go a gritty route and tries to reimagine her origin story. And even though Squeenix on their tenure called each one quote unquote below expectations, even though, oh, as has been pointed out, they're not really known for setting the expectations, and especially in that time frame. Um, and, but it was also followed up with two of its own sequels that continue the storyline. Rise of the Tomb Raider in 2015 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider in 2018. And these are basically the ones that had the most complicated relationship with the main sense. I mentioned them before, and because from a gameplay perspective, they're actually not the worst thing ever. Not just in things like combat, platforming, also the actual act of actually getting into tombs to raid them, um, as if to say this should be in a museum. Um, it's the actual things they did with Lara's character and story that I was not too terribly fond of. Sure there were dark moments in other games, but these were unpleasant ones. Like it's reminded me the most of DMC Devil May Cry, where even there's a contingent of fan base is that have expressed a sentiment in a similar vein where they're not bad games per se, they're just not the Tomb Raider games we were hoping for. And the fact that the sales were strong but didn't meet the published expectations, combined with other experiments that range from live service titles to cryptocurrency, and now these AI apps compounded it, them to sell the rights, and in fact, the entire their catalog and even the companies themselves to the Embracer Group, who which makes a good enough time to wrap this up here. So, with the remasters of the previous trilogies performing solidly in terms of reviews and sales, I personally enjoyed them. How they combine the best elements of the original games with a nice visual overhaul and legend style controls, as well as also other material and goodies in there. We also got two very, very big reveals for new titles with a new remake of the original game, subtitled titled as Legacy of Atlantis, this, and a whole direct sequel to Underworld, to a Catalyst, that's coming this year and next respectively. Even though there's no release windows beyond those just yet, just the idea that we're finally getting classic Lara back, in that sense, to me, is exciting. And there'll be other times we talk about the adaptations. I tinker with the idea in this video, but we'll just keep the focus on the games. But if I'm being completely honest, even the new design is actually closer to what I was hoping for, like the tank top, the cargo shorts, the hair being up the just the right measure of attractive and practical, I would say. As for the discourse about any other little minor details, like looking at myself, I don't really care about one character's chin. I care about their entire hair design. I mean, it's definitely one of the ones that's much like Mario, oh, Sonic, and Pikachu can indeed stand the test of time. As many others have tried to who use this influence, but few have truly succeeded. And with that, that's another milestone video in the can, and I will see you all very soon with my 450 subscriber special why Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker is my favorite GameCube game. That's all for now. Take care and happy Valentine's Day to those observing.